good evening and welcome to Monday Night Live. I am Tanja Kraus and I'm from Tanja Kraus Horsemanship, and I'm going to give Facebook a couple of minutes to let everybody know that we've gone live, and if you can start letting me know when you've arrived by either hitting one of the icons or commenting down in the comment section, that would be fantastic, and then I know that we can get started. You can also share this Monday Night Live feed if you know anyone who might be interested in it. Hi Ashley, thanks for joining. By clicking on the share button, or you can invite friends. I'm not sure exactly what you guys can see because I can't see what you can see. And I've also got some what I'm going to share with you tonight is, hey Hillary, how you going? Recovering from injury, how horses and humans can get back in the game. So that's the topic for tonight's Monday Night Live. You might notice that it looks a little bit different behind me here. I'm coming to you live from the Gold Coast this week. I've just finished up a 3-day course at Talabudra, and the course was a 3-day taking it to the next level. So hi anyone who's joining who's just spent the last 3 days with me. You might be pretty sick of hearing my voice by now, so there's every chance that you haven't logged in. But it was a fantastic clinic. We had a great time, and it was just awesome to see everyone there. So tonight, as I said, we're going to chat about recovering from injury and how horses and humans can get back into the game. And I guess what I want to share with you tonight is probably some of the things that come to mind. Hey Gwenda, probably some of the things that come to mind for me when I think about my horse being injured, or I think about myself being injured and us needing to get back into it. So I'm just gonna, hey Angel, how you going? Hey Michelle, how you going? Oh yes, absolutely. So hopefully I'll be able to, hey Brett, thanks for joining in. Yep, you get back to the mat. Hopefully we'll be able to share some stuff that will help you. Hey Kate, thanks for joining. And we can, if you have any questions or anything like that, please put them down in the comments. And the comments do roll pretty fast, but depending on how fast they're going, I can sometimes get to them. So what I'm going to do is, first I want to say, please do not go against any veterinary or medical advice that you have received in regards to the rehabilitation of yourself or your horse. I'm not here to give information out that I want you to say, oh, well, if Tanya said it, it must be okay, because each individual case has to be taken on its own circumstances and merits. So I definitely don't want you going against what a vet or what your doctor has told you to do. But some of the things that we need to consider, what I'm going to do is take you through the horse stuff first. And one of the things that I want to chat about is firstly starting while the horse is injured. So the topic is about recovering from injury and bringing them back into work, which I'm definitely going to share with you some of those things. But I think one of the most important things that we can do is actually manage the injury, or manage the time that the horse is spending. Often they have to be restricted in their movement, so they might be in a box, or they might be in a really small paddock, and they might be isolated from friends and things like that. And I think we can do a lot of things to help them get through their injury time, that's going to help them recover quickly, both mentally and physically, quicker than if we just sort of wait until they're ready to work and then grab them out and start doing stuff with them. So with regards to the horse, one of the things that I want to talk about is definitely their mental state when they're injured. And as I said, often they're kept in we have to keep them in a small box or in a small paddock, or maybe even isolate them from their paddock mates to recover from injury. And so this can be really mentally challenging for the horse, and it can cause a lot of anxiety, and it can lead to a whole set of problems on their own, like weaving or wood sucking or other of those behaviours that we don't desire when they've been locked up. And so the first thing I want to talk about is stimulation, and making sure that we're stimulating the horse as best as we possibly can while he's recovering from his injury. And some of the things that we can do to help keep him mentally entertained, one of the main things that I will do when I've got horses in a small yard is definitely use slow feeder hay nets. So they are obviously taking longer to get to their feed. It lasts them a lot longer. This is physically beneficial as well in terms of their gut health and not, being able to replicate grazing all day, I guess. But it's also a boredom buster in terms of they've got something to do and the hay net's going to move and things like that. So I like to set up 2 or 3 hay nets depending on how big the box is, so they can kind of go one to the other. And if my horse is going to be locked up for a while, so if it's sort of 1 to 2 weeks or 6 weeks, or depending on the injury, I'll go ahead and try and mix up the types of hay in each of those bags, so they can sort of go to one and then go to another and go to another. Again, on nutritional advice, you want to make sure that you're taking the best care of your horse while he's locked up, but I definitely like him to have a range of different hays available to him in those slow feeder hay nets, so he can pick and choose what he's wanting to eat, and it's just that little bit of stimulation for him. He's got a bit of a choice there. So number 1 would be slow feeder hay nets. You can definitely put him in like a jolly ball or something like that. There's other, toys or licks or, things like that you can hang up in the stable that just gives them something to do with their mouth. And it's a lot better than them developing the habit of chewing on stable or things like that. So definitely stimulation is something that we need to consider for those locked up horses. Just to touch on nutrition, if your horse is going to be locked up or injured for a while, nutritionally you want to definitely support his health in terms of him recovering from injury physically. So if it's a wound or something like that, you want to boost his immunity to infection, and you want to give him some kind of feeds and things like that are going to promote healing. But it is definitely a time that we need to consider reducing, high-level energy feeds, especially if he doesn't need to be moving around. If he's got an injury that he's supposed to be isolated, you need to drop out high-energy feeds. You need to drop out grains and things like that, because they're going to wreak havoc in the gut, and they're also going to cause him to have a hell of a lot of energy that he's got no way of getting rid of, and it's going to contribute to those bad behaviours. So stimulation is definitely one of the things that I recommend in terms of our horse's recovery. Also, something we need to consider, especially if the horse needs to be boxed for some time, is putting another horse in the stables. Now, I understand that you may not want to choose only one horse and put it in the stables with him, because then that other horse is going to potentially have bad behaviours or mental problems in terms of them being locked up for 6 weeks. But if you do have the opportunity to maybe rotate through a few different horses that can keep him company. I can see there Hillary saying, if I have to stable for a while, I try to find a companion. So definitely you want to put another horse in there. You do want to avoid the situation where you're putting one in overnight and then taking it away, because obviously, every time you take that horse away, the horse is going to be distressed and he's going to be worried about that. But if you've got access to multiple horses, then you can go ahead and just rotate that companion through, so at least he doesn't feel like he's alone all the time. Another thing that we need to consider is us spending more time with them. Often when they're injured, I know that they can sort of go, oh, well, he's on the back burner, he's locked up in the stable, so I'm going to meet his nutritional needs and I'm going to meet his medical needs and make sure he's medicated and all that sort of stuff. But we might not spend as much time with them. If say we normally ride for an hour a day or half an hour a day, we might not think of, say, spending that half an hour with that horse and still spending the interaction and the time with them. So never underestimate the bond that you can have with your horse, and the fact that he is going to miss you if you are regularly spending time with him, and then he needs to be locked up or he's unable to be ridden. Then he's going to miss that interaction with you as well. So definitely go down there and brush him and things like that, and maybe sit with him and spend the time you would have normally spent riding him, at least in his company, so he is still getting to see you, and that is going to help with your bond when he comes back into work. The last thing you want to do is disappear on the horse and then come back and say, oh great, you can be ridden again, and here I am to ride you. It's that would be a very one-sided relationship in that regard. The next thing that we need to consider is what he is actually going through in terms of his injury, and you know, any sore spots that's going to create. You know, if he's going to be locked in a box, he is going to be sort of starting to have energy stores that he may not be used to, and that could cause him to have those undesirable behaviors. But what it could also cause him to happen is if he's resting one leg all the time, he's potentially going to be getting sore in another part of his body. His muscles might start to seize up, or he might be using one side of his body more than the other side of his body. So I think it's very beneficial. It's very warranted for us to spend a little bit of time considering not only the injury and the pain that it's causing in its own area, but what referred pain could be happening for the horse elsewhere, and addressing that. So maybe we need to get the horse massaged on a regular basis, or at least perform some stretches if we're able to in his stable, things like that, to try and take away any referred pain that he's having, or if he's having to use, you know, one side of his body more than the other in the management of his injury. So that's something that we definitely need to consider there. So again, while he's recovering from injury, depending on what the location of the injury is and what the injury, you know, what he is allowed to do physically, there's probably a few things that we can do while he's confined to a box stall, and that would be, you know, things like our lateral flexion. It would be the stretches that we can do. Again, we have to take into consideration where the horse is injured, but definitely stretches, definitely our lateral flexions, which is response to the halter, and the stretching that goes along with that as well. Maybe he's able to do little hindquarter yields or something like that if he's allowed to walk around in a stall. Maybe you can pick his feet up. Any of those little things that just keeps the little training in there. Anything that you can do that's going to help the horse still remain connected and listening to you and using himself in a way that he can is going to physically benefit him. It's going to mentally benefit him because he's remaining stimulated, and it's going to maintain the respect that you two have in terms of your, you know, getting back on him or getting back into work with him. You know, the respect and the communication, you're going to keep those lines open instead of just ignoring him for the 4 or 6 weeks or whatever that he's boxed for. Something else that I do consider, depending on how long the horse has to stay in the box, is teaching them some tricks. And the only reason I would do this would be, you know, I don't particularly train tricks or anything like that. I'm not a trick trainer. But what trick training can do for the horse, again, within the realms of what his injury is going to allow him to do, it just provides you with that interaction with him, just like your like lateral flexion is going to do, but it adds that little bit more interest or motivation. If you are really restricted in what you can do in terms of your training, doing something completely new and completely different and coming at it from a fun angle is something that can really help the horse and stimulate the horse. So if he's not allowed to move his feet or anything like that, then maybe you could go through the process of teaching him how to smile or how to hug you. I mean, I'm sure if you Google horse tricks, there's about 1 million that you'll find on the internet. And I think that if you definitely consider that you're only doing the trick training for a mental stimulation, that it really doesn't matter if it takes you a month to train the horse to smile, because all you're trying to do is keep a dialogue open and keep the horse interested. I mean, I'm sure if you've spent time injured yourself, and especially being bedridden or not being able to do much stuff, you go stir crazy, and horses definitely don't have books and DVDs and things like that to keep them interested. They don't have the TV. So, introducing something that he normally wouldn't have, like learning how to smile. Obviously you do a trick training with treats as well. So, it's just something that a little bit different, a little bit interesting to keep him motivated and keep him interested, and to stop him from getting so, down and out, so to speak, for being locked in the box. Another thing that we can do when it comes to managing our horses in the box is to not constantly, but you could introduce maybe having a radio on or having a TV on in the stable. Obviously not in the stable with the horse. You don't want him damaging himself or damaging the equipment. But it's just, you know, a different sound, nothing too loud or anything like that. But what you want to try and do is keep the horse engaged and stimulated in terms of all of his senses. So when you're talking about a horse being boxed in a small stable or being restricted to a small paddock, what you're taking away from him is interacting with his friends and being able to see what's going on in the world. So even, you know, my horses in their paddock, you know, have cars driving past and they've got ducks on the pond and they've got, you know, horses next door and they've got motorbikes going past and they've got birds flying around and cattle across the road. So they're just constantly got a bit of stimulation going. So once you restrict them into a small yard or a box, then you're taking a lot of that stimulation away. So we need to recreate that in some way, not necessarily for desensitization or anything like that, but definitely for just so the horse can sort of, you know, use those senses, I guess, and just hear something a little bit different every now and then. Desensitization is another one that you can do if they're boxed up and they're not allowed to move very much, providing that you do it on a very quiet level and you're not trying to scare the horse. You know, desensitization in terms of exposing him to maybe you know, raincoats or balls or things like that. Again, I can't stress it enough. If you've got a spooky horse, you don't want to start throwing raincoats in there, and the idea is not saying, oh, well, you're locked in a box so you can't get away from this. It's for mental stimulation. So we've always got to have that in the back of our mind. What I'm trying to do here is just keep the horse interested and you know, looking for, you know, what's happening and what's going on and being interactive with what's going on. So Michelle's saying positive outcome from a negative incident. So when my mare injured herself, when we got to the other side of it, the respect for each other was far greater than it was before her injury. So it was a positive outcome from a negative incident. So I'm guessing that Michelle spent quite a bit of time interacting with the horse and not only caring for the horse, but definitely spending that quality time with them. And then when you do come out the other side of it, you can find that that downtime or that lower level interaction in terms of energy level, that lower energy level interaction can certainly build the respect and the bond that you have for each other. Once your horse is starting to recover and you are able to move the horse around, we need to take into consideration, again, not only the site of the injury or where the horse was injured, but we need to understand that if they've been restricted in their movement, that their muscles are going to be potentially quite tight. Their muscles may be quite soft, which I know that's a contradiction in itself, but you know what I mean. If you haven't moved for very long, your muscles, like once you start moving them, they're going to be sort of, you know, a little bit pulley and things like that because you haven't stretched them out as well as you could have. You know, if you've been restricted to a bed or something like that, and like your horse has been restricted to a box, you know, walking around in a 3x3 meter stable or a 4x4 meter stable is much quieter, shorter steps than walking around in the paddock. So you need to take into consideration that horse hasn't taken nice, big, fluid steps while he's been locked in that box. So we want to build slowly towards his fitness. We're not going to let him out and we're not going to let him go straight away, because the first thing he's going to want to do is probably bolt around. So we're just going to walk him out, lead him around and let him recover, roll his hips around to get him disengaging, and just let him find his feet and let him, you know, come outside and relax and really help him through those initial times. So you can support him in when you do finally let him go, that hopefully he's not just going to take off and, you know, risk injuring himself again very badly. So you can walk the horse out on the lead line. You can begin to introduce your ground exercises at a really low level in terms of fitness. Hey, Leah. A really low level in terms of fitness. You can try a little bit of liberty in a smaller area, say a round yard or something like that, provided that you think that your horse is not going to, hit the edge of that round yard and just bolt and bolt and bolt around. That's something that we do want to avoid. And not only for the horse preventing him doing another injury to himself, but also to prevent the horse from causing his, a large buildup of lactic acid in his muscles and things like that, because, his muscles haven't been used. They're going to be quite soft. The blood flow hasn't been there. They haven't been oxygenated the way that they normally would be when he's walking around in his paddock. So these are all things that we need to take into consideration for the horse. Another thing that we need to take into consideration for the horse is any perceived limitations or real limitations that your horse is going to have. So what I mean by that is, if your horse has had an injury where it's caused something to be tight, so even scar tissue is going to feel uncomfortable for your horse when he starts walking. Tendons may be a little bit tighter, ligaments may be a little bit tighter, muscle-wise, we just spoke about that, they might be a little bit tighter and shorter. So when your horse first comes out of that box and starts walking around, he might think to himself, oh, gee, it hurts to walk around. And so he's going to have to push through that and discover what his new limitations are potentially, and that may require some physical rehabilitation in terms of stretching and walking him out and things like that to try and reduce that scar tissue and get everything moving the way that it should. The other side of that coin is if your horse has experienced an injury where he has been in a lot of pain and he hasn't been able to fully weight bear on a leg or something like that, what is potentially going to happen is that he is going to think that he's got a limitation. He's going to think that certain movements are going to cause him pain, and he's not going to want to perform at the level he was performing before he got injured. So we see this a lot in hind legs when it comes to canter departs. Sometimes a horse will stop taking, say, a left lead canter if he's injured on his right hind leg, or if he's had a bit of a hip injury on his right side. Then he may think to himself, oh, I can't do that. I can't left lead canter because I know it is going to hurt me. And even though the vet's given us clearance and everyone's looked at it and tested it and all that, and everyone says, oh, no, it's fine, the horse is still going to say, oh, no, this is going to hurt. It's similar to us when, maybe we've had a toothache or a hole in our tooth, and we've learnt to chew on the other side of our mouth. Well, once we go to the dentist and get that tooth fixed, the first few times that we go to chew, we have to consciously force ourselves to chew on the other side of that mouth, the one that we've been protecting for all that time, because our brain knows that it's going to hurt to chew on that side. So your brain will automatically keep sending your food to the other side of your mouth, and you will have to consciously prove to your brain that it isn't going to hurt anymore. And sometimes that's what we have to do with our horses. So that's what we really have to take into consideration when it comes to the horse. They're the first things that come to my mind when it comes to the rehabilitation of my horse from any injury. When it comes to ourselves and we experience an injury and our rehabilitation, we have to consider many of the same things that we've taken into consideration for the horse. And again, I want to start by talking about what we are going to do with our horse the minute that we know that we're injured and that we may be out for a period of time. Now, every situation is going to be different, and you feel free to comment if you're experiencing this at the moment, and I'm happy to share with you my advice. Some of you are going to have an injury and a horse that you can still work with. So, for example, if I was to injure myself tomorrow and I had, an injury on my foot or my hand or something, and I could still get around in some capacity, then I would still consider that I would be able to work with Cooper, even if it was only on the ground, or Boogie, because both of those horses are advanced level horses. They're respectful horses, and I know that they're not going to, pull me in a way that's going to cause me further injury, and it would be a calculated decision that I would make. I would make decisions about what exercises I would be doing with those horses in order to keep them in work. Would I go out and work with a client's horse that I don't know, or a client's horse that potentially is having trouble and is going to pull me or cause me further injury? No, I would not. So when it comes to human injury, I have to take into consideration my horse and my ability to continue working with my horse, and what I know in my experiences of my horse. So if you've got an advanced horse or a horse that's quite respectful and things like that, then sure, you may be able to still go out to the paddock and do, minimal things like ground exercises, or maybe you'll be able to stand in the middle of the round yard and do some liberty because you're just standing there. Things like that. You'll be able to maybe pick and choose from your whole education program that you use. You can pick and choose the things that you think, I can still do that because my horse is respectful, and things like that. If you've got a young horse that you're, halfway through starting and all of a sudden you've got injured, or you're halfway through training a young horse, or you've got a new horse so you're not really sure, then once you've experienced an injury, you need to take into consideration whether that horse needs to be turned out for the term of your injury. And I do not mean turned out in your 1 acre paddock and get fed twice a day, because you're just going to create a time bomb for yourself. When you do recover from your injury, you're going to have a horse that's going to be jumping out of his skin with energy and, hard to handle, and you're going to risk re-injuring yourself. So when I say, turn the horse out, I mean go and find 100 acres or a 50 acre paddock and a herd that you can turn that horse out in. So he's developing his social skills, he's developing his herd skills, and he's taking care of himself while you're unable to work with him. That's the best case scenario if you're needing to turn your horse out. The other thing that you need to consider, or another thing that you can consider, if you can't turn your horse out, if you don't have availability of that acreage, if you don't, have a herd or whatever, the other thing that you need to consider is getting someone that you trust, obviously, to take care of the horse, or ride the horse, or do training sessions with the horse while you are unable to do so. Now you have to make those decisions very, very carefully. I was only speaking to a lady this weekend that had a very poor experience where she was injured. She tried to do the right thing by her horse and sent it off to a trainer, and when she received the horse back home, it was not the same horse in terms of its trust and things like that. It had been, it had not had a great experience away at the trainer. So when you're considering sending your horse to a trainer while you're injured, yes, it's a great idea. I'm obviously a trainer myself. I take in horses, but you need to pick and choose who you are going to send that horse to and who you can trust in that regard. Another option may be asking someone to come to you and work with the horse, so you're still able to come outside, hopefully, and watch it. Obviously, if you're bedridden, then that might not be an option, but then the turnout's probably a better option anyway, because then you're going to need someone to come and look after it anyway, so maybe turning it out and letting someone check on it and things like that. So, looking after the horse's needs while you're injured is something that you need to have at the top, and not just his basic needs in terms of feeding and rugging and things like that. Managing his education and managing his energy, reducing his feed while you're injured, all those sort of things need to be taken into consideration. Keeping him stimulated while you're unable to do what you normally would do with the horse. When you're first returning back to work, horse work, after an injury, then what I would take into consideration is Again, what horse you're going to get on for the first time, or what horse you're going to can work with for the first time. If you've got a young, unpredictable horse, I wouldn't be coming off a 4-week or a 6-week or a long-term absence and walking out into the paddock and getting a young horse and saying, oh, I was pretty good at this 6 weeks ago, so I'm going to go and grab the first horse that I come across, or grab my young horse, or grab an unpredictable horse, because your timing is probably going to be out somewhat. You're potentially going to be favoring somewhere on your body when it comes to your where your injury was. So I would recommend working with either an advanced horse of your own, a horse that you trust, a horse that you know is going to do the what you're asking, and the ground exercises and all that sort of thing. Or I would recommend going and riding a schoolmaster, so you've got someone not only on the ground, but you're riding a horse that has been in work the whole time that you've been injured, and you can sort of, I call it getting your sea legs back. You can sort of get your sea legs back, and remember sort of how to handle a horse or how to ride and things like that. I know that 4 or 6 weeks isn't a long time when a lot of us have been riding for decades, but that first time back on a horse can be really important. So you definitely want to take into consideration very carefully the horse that you return back to work with. Hey Hannah, sorry she's a bit late. Yes, we did. We had a fantastic clinic on the Gold Coast. Thank you. So yeah, ride a schoolmaster first. Now, when it comes to coming back together with your horse after your injury, one of the things that I do highly recommend is attending a clinic, because a clinic is going to be 2 or 3 or 5 days or 10 days or whatever it is. It's going to be a long time that you can spend with your horse, and it's going to be fairly uninterrupted work. You're going to have the eyes of the clinician or the instructor there for you, and it's going to give you the opportunity to really get back with your horse and really bond with him and spend some real quality time. Obviously, you need to take into consideration your fitness levels, your horse's fitness levels when it comes to choosing a clinic to go to, but it's something I definitely highly recommend. I don't recommend turning up to a clinic and sort of saying, I haven't ridden this horse for 6 weeks and he hasn't been ridden for 6 weeks and here we are, because that can sometimes be a stressful situation for you because you're in a group and things like that. I would recommend, riding that schoolmaster and getting 1 or 2 rides in on your own horse before you came to a clinic, but spending, several days back to back with your horse under instruction is something that I would highly recommend when it comes to getting back into the swing of things. It's a really good way to, reestablish the relationship and get started and move forward from taking a break. Something else that you need to consider is being prepared to adjust to your injury. You are also going to potentially have scar tissue or sore bits or weak muscles or, different sensation depending on what the injury is. You're probably going to feel a little bit different, and you need to be prepared to adjust to that feeling and that sensation. And you might also need to adjust in terms of your ability. I meet a lot of people at my clinics that have maybe had, I think I met a lady a while ago now that had a knee reconstruction, or had been something had happened on one side of her body, and so she was uneven, and so she couldn't apply very much pressure with her left leg, but she could apply the normal amount of pressure with her right leg. So she not only had to adjust to that information and that new physical way that her body was, but we had to retrain the horse because the left leg pressure was no longer equal with the right leg pressure, and the left leg pressure was no longer at the level that she had been using before her injury. So you have to be prepared and understand that sometimes you're going to be different. You're going to feel different to the horse, and so the cues are going to feel different to the horse. So there's a great possibility that your horse is not going to respond the way that he was before, not only through lack of consistency because he's had a break, but through a new feeling to him and a new feeling to you. So that's something that you definitely need to take on board. It's something that you need to consider and be aware of, and then it's something that you need to take time out to actually retrain both yourself and your horse when it comes to dealing with your new physical capabilities. Something that brings me to is being patient with the horse and being patient with the process, because I know how frustrating it can be when when things aren't going our way and we're not experiencing the horse the way that we used to. And I meet a lot of people that are returning back to riding either after a long break or after an injury, and it can be really frustrating because our body doesn't work the way that it used to, and we don't have the same capacity that we used to. So being prepared for those frustrations, but also being positive about the fact that we can teach a horse to adjust to your new physical traits, and it can be sometimes it can take a little bit of time, but it's not a hopeless journey. You absolutely can adjust, teach the horse new cues, just like we taught him the old cues, and he can adapt to you, and then you can move forward together. So when it comes to your human limitations, it's about being aware of them and then trying to recreate new cues and things like that for the horse to understand. So it's a little bit of a learning process for both of you, and but as I see it quite a lot, and it can be very successful, no matter what issues that have been. So that's the information that we have in regards to the human and the horse, and both of you coming back to, hey Mandy, how you going? Coming back to work after an injury. So I hope that I've answered a few of your questions. I hope that I've given you some information to go home with and to consider. I hope that none of you are injured, but maybe some of you are injured that are watching here tonight. I know Michelle said that she was, so I hope that helps you, Michelle, in regards to moving on, recovering from your injury and being able to handle and work with those horses. And I think one of the most powerful things that we can have when it comes to a situation like this, both with a horse injury and our own injury, is having patience with the whole situation and having acceptance that it's not going to be the same for the horse, it's not going to be the same for us, but that's fine. We can definitely move on and learn about each other and learn the new things about each other again. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's live. I've got a favor to ask you all for next week's live show is 10 questions with Tanja. So what I'm hoping that you're all going to do is think about a question that you'd like to ask me, and a horsey question, of course, and go ahead and send those questions in to either this Facebook page or my email, or those of you that have my number, you can text them to me, and I'm going to pick 10 questions and I'm going to answer them all tomorrow, on next week's Monday Night Live. So, definitely, you're welcome, Ange. Thank you, Hillary, for watching. Julie, no worries, you can watch the replay. Great to have you here. So yes, please send in your questions. I'm here to answer them, and next Monday I'm looking forward to answering all your questions. So please send them over. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone has a fantastic week with their horses. Have a great one. Bye.